boy. All right, guys. I made a whole video about this earlier, but we've talked about this multiple times. Matter of fact, we talked about it here just not too long ago. One of Marvel's biggest issues, I think, in phase 4 has been that the stories have gotten out of pocket with the humor. Let me be very clear. No one is saying that Marvel movies need to be dark and grim and serious. No one's saying that. That's not, they don't have to be. However, you don't need the complete opposite of that either in having these movies be stupid and silly and goofy. And it's not just Marvel. That's what a lot of these comic book movies. We just saw Shazam go way too silly and dumb, and that failed. We saw Ant-Man go all crazy, and that just didn't do it. I have holes. Shut up. We just saw Thor Love and Thunder, which is the perfect example of going too silly, and that did not work. Now, is it fine to sprinkle in a couple things here and there? Sure. But you can't go too silly or too goofy, because if you go full goofy, it's just not going to work out. And I told y'all this too. How many movies, whether it's DC or Marvel, how many movies are in your personal top 5 that are straight up comedies? How many superhero movies are in your top 5? Because I think the only exception might be Thor Ragnarok and maybe Guardians 1, maybe, if you even want to call that a comedy. I thought it was like an adventure with some humor in it. But comedies don't usually end up the top of the list in terms of quality. They're usually the movies that we put at the bottom of the list. And when it comes to Marvel specifically, I told y'all that I had this very concern when it came to the Marvels. Because when I went to the Disney convention or whatever, D23, they showed us a clip of the Marvels, and it was just highlight footage. You know, it's like an extended trailer. And I remember watching it, and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to be good. Because not only did I not know what the movie was about, but it was all this randomness happening. And it looked like a Disney movie rather than a Marvel movie. In other words, it looked like a movie that if you turned on the Disney Channel, it looked like something like that rather than, oh, this is a Marvel product with action and da 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 da. So I was sitting there, I was like, I don't know. And I told y'all, I made a whole video about this, about my concerns. I had 4 concerns when it came to the Marvels. I thought it was going to be, way too silly. I thought it was going to be, well, y'all can go watch that video when you get a chance. I laid it all out there. But unfortunately, it looks like here, my biggest concerns have actually come true. Because according to this, the Marvel's director has not only talked about superhero fatigue, but said that the new Marvel's movie is going to be really wacky and silly. Yikes. All right, let's see what she had to say. Nia DaCosta. She says here, I think superhero fatigue absolutely exists. The biggest difference from the other MCU movies to date is that the Marvels is really wacky and silly. The worlds we go to in this movie are worlds unlike others you've seen in the MCU. Bright worlds you haven't seen before. First of all, how many times do we have to like keep throwing superhero movie fatigue out there before we call it what it is? If a movie keeps doing the same thing, you're fatigued about that same thing, not the genre. Because last I checked, didn't Across the Spider-Verse just bust out of nowhere as being one of the best movies of 2023? Haven't y'all just got done watching volume 3 of Guardians of the Galaxy, talking about how great that was? Where was the fatigue then? Where was the fatigue when these movies were doing great? When these superhero movies were doing great, where was this magical fatigue? It's not true. It's a stupid term that keeps on getting thrown out. You know what? Calling superhero fatigue is kind of as dumb as calling out black on black violence, because black on black violence happens the same way white on white violence happens. It happens the same way as Asian on Asian violence happens. Why? Because violence happens according to proximity. If you live in an area with a certain amount of people, that's where the violence happens, and people tend to be there. It's the same thing. If movies in superhero genres or whatever, if they do the same thing, that's going to be a boring formula because the stories are not compelling, not because people are tired of the genre. Didn't I just give you the example with comedies? When was the last time we saw really good comedies the same way that we saw at the rate that we saw back in the 2000s and 90s? We haven't seen that kind of surge in a long time because the genre has been staying with the same, basic formula, and it hasn't been good. It's been tamed, it's been pulled back, it's not good. But we don't talk about comedy movie fatigue. So we don't need to talk about superhero movie fatigue because they're not real. We just are lacking originality. We're lacking good quality. That's the problem. And before we get to the latter part of her conversation, Lord and Miller, the guys that brought you to Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse movies, they dismantled this stupid superhero fatigue thing by saying if you're using the same story structure and the same style and the same tone and the same vibe as movies and shows that have come before, it doesn't matter what genre it is. It's going to be boring to people. That's it. That's it. That's it. If you keep doing the same nonsense, that's boring because we want different types of storytelling. That's all. All right, now let's get on to Captain Marvel. Now, she said here that it's going to be really wacky and silly. This is the problem. This is not an attack against Captain Marvel. This is not an attack against Brie Larson. This is not an attack on women in these movies. This is an attack in terms of the formula and the approach to the storytelling. Why are you still trying to make things wacky and silly when that has not proven in this current, formula to be effective? Now, does this mean I'm not going to watch the movie? No, I'm going to go watch it. I'll give it a shot. But at the same time, I've been soured by multiple other superhero movies that have been wacky and silly or whatever, and they have not panned out very well. So my trust is very low with this approach. I don't think wacky and silly bodes very well for these movies. Not to mention, Captain Marvel is not a character that promotes that. That's not what you got us into. When you first had the first Captain Marvel movie that made $1 billion, was that wacky and silly? I mean, some of the parts were, and I don't think those parts worked very well, but that's not the way the movie was advertised. See, I think it's a little different because it depends on certain expectations. Let's take Ant-Man, for example. When you watch the first Ant-Man movie, it actually was more serious than it was funny, but overall, I think we understood Ant-Man is going to be a funny movie. So when Ant-Man 2 came out, when they had little funny jokes and stuff, we rolled with it. We went right along with it because the expectation was already set that, hey, Ant-Man is a very light, humorous type of franchise. So don't go looking too much into this. And then, of course, they went a little too far with Ant-Man 3. But Captain Marvel, you went from something semi moderately serious to silly and wacky. I mean, silly and wacky can work for some people, but I feel like when you change up gears like that, you're now alienating the people that were on board because maybe they don't get down with that. Maybe you'll attract some new people that like silly and wacky stuff. But again, like I've said, the track record for silly and wacky does not hold up. Thor Ragnarok seems to be the only exception right now, at least in Marvel, that's going to hold that up. I don't think that this is a good approach. And if anything, this only adds to my worry about the movie. Again, not because of the actors, not because of the characters, because of the direction. I'm not a wacky, silly kind of guy. That's not what this is. I feel like Marvel came into the mix, what, in 2012? We are now in 2013. That means even if you were just born when Marvel movies came out, at least you're 11 years old, 12, whatever. But the people that were 10, 12, 11 years old, they in their 20s now, right? At least. Do they want to see what, wacky and silly stuff? Or is it time to maybe start giving people more serious and mature stories? I don't know. But either way, y'all let me know. What do you think about this director's comments about the Marvels? Does it entice you? Maybe you like wacky and silly stuff. Are you excited for the Marvels after hearing this? Are you discouraged? Whatever you're feeling, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. This was just a segment of one of my live chats, and if you're interested in joining in on the next one, be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications for more. I've got more videos and reviews to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you all later.